as Alexandra was saying, you've decided to create a Google for trees, basically. Can you please first just tell me the story of how you decided to do this?
So basically, I'm coming from a very different background. When I was young, I was not an environmentalist. I also didn't know about climate change. But I actually wanted to do business, and I was actually buying stocks on the stock markets when I was 16 years old, so a bit of a nerdy activity, I would say. But then after studying business, I actually went for a trip around the world, and I lived in Nepal for half a year and also 1 year in Latin America. And there I realized how unfair our world is and how much we're destroying our planet. And that's when I decided that I wanted to do something about this to help our planet, to also solve climate change and really to help people. And I realized that planting trees is the best way of doing that.
So can you tell the story of Ecosia? How did it come about? Because obviously thinking of a search engine for trees is not like a link that you make immediately.
Yes, so I was fascinated about trees, and before I started Ecosia, I had a little website where you could compare different offerings from banks. Since I was investing into the stock market, I knew that pretty well. And if somebody signed up through that website, I would earn a commission, and this is how I financed my trip around the world, for example. But I also realized that I'm giving most of my money away to Google, and that Google has the power to decide whether I get attention from the users or not. So I realized that this search engine idea is pretty clever and that search engines will have a lot of power in the future. So I just basically combined my newly found passion for trees with my my interest in search engines, and this is how a search engine that plants trees came about.
So in practice, can you sort of explain how it works? How do you decide which trees you plant? I think you've talked to me about the best job in your company, which is tree planting officer.
Yes,
Which is
even chief tree planting officer, which is even better. So yes, we already planted over 82 million trees, so quite a lot of trees, and that's a lot of trees to take care about. And we have Peter, who is our tree planting officer, and he basically selects where and how we plant trees. So we're working with over 20 different organizations in more than a dozen different countries. And there we try to plant trees in a way that they're of course beneficial for people, but also beneficial for the communities and their environment there, but of course also absorb a lot of CO2. And most importantly, we want to make sure that the trees actually stay standing. So we don't want to just plant trees and go away, but actually plant trees that stay there forever, and also plant trees that help to protect other trees. So the only thing that is smarter than planting trees, in my opinion, is not cutting down trees. So we're trying to combine that in our projects. And Peter has this amazing job. I wanted to apply for that job, but I didn't get it. I didn't have the necessary qualifications. Yeah, he's doing that, and his team.
When we first talked, you said to me, originally I wanted to be a millionaire. And there was a moment, a switch in 2018, if I remember correctly, where you knew that that wasn't going to happen, at least not with Ecosia. Can you tell me what you did and what that meant for your company and for your personal finances?
Yeah, I'm a tree millionaire now, so I think that's better. But indeed, when I was young, I thought making money is great, and I want to make as much money as possible. But then Ecosia kept growing and growing over the last years, and we really reached a point where I felt like, oh, I've built up something that is much, much bigger than myself. I've built up something that is actually that doesn't really belong to me, but belongs to everyone who's using Ecosia and also basically to Mother Earth. But when you look at it from a legal perspective, I could just sell it. I could just sell it for, I mean, it's the value of Ecosia, if it was a normal startup, would be hundreds of millions by now, probably. So I could just go to Microsoft or Google and sell it. And for me, it was very clear that I didn't want to do that, but also what if something happened to me? So I wanted just to make sure to protect Ecosia from all of those external interests, because we're the only independent search engine on the planet, basically, the only search engine that doesn't have to maximize profits. And so yeah, we tried to look for a solution and basically decided to give 99.9% of the shares of Ecosia to a foundation, and this foundation makes sure that we can never sell the company, that never any profits can be taken out of the company, and also that the control of the company has to be from people who are actually working within the company. So we're a self-owned, non-profit, for-profit business. And that meant that I gave away quite a lot of money. But this is, for me, the biggest thing that I could do to create that kind of world that I wanted to see, because I really don't believe that in 20 years, 30 years, people will still think as much about profit maximization as we do now.
Can you tell me now the story of how EcoZia grew? Because when you started, it was very, very small. You couldn't pay people. You had to convince people to work for you for free, basically. Can you tell people about this? Because I think it's very interesting, you know, creating full profit with people who donate their time and energy.
Yeah, so during the first years, we didn't have any funding, we didn't have any investors, so that made it a bit more difficult. Ecosia is 10 years now, so the first few years were really quite challenging. We had only very little income, and most of that income we gave away for tree planting. So our first programmer, for example, he was still going to school. I think he was 17 or something like that. He was one of the few ones that didn't run away when I asked them if they wanted to work with me. And of course, also friends helped, and people really cared about Ecosia's mission and wanted to help build that up. And without that passion and energy, it wouldn't have been possible. And also for me, I'm basically only paying myself a salary for maybe 5 years now, but the first 5 years, I mean, it was also, I was younger and I was living in Berlin, so the times, I mean, in Berlin you can live with very little money and still have a very good life. But yes, I think this way of building the company eventually allowed us to give Ecosia away in the end, because if we had to pay investors a high return, then this wouldn't have been possible.
And can you, this is the second part of my question, I guess, how did you get people to invest in your idea? Which I think you said to me, if you invest in my company, you're not getting your money back, basically.
I think it's just, I made it very credible that I care about building a better and greener world for everyone. And this, I think, is what a lot of people also want to do. And many people were not doing this full time, but just use their free time to support us. And I think it was just credible, and also I had to do some convincing, of course. I mean, if you're building a startup, then you have to sell a dream to the people around you, and yeah, that was what I was trying to do.
I guess you were conscious about the climate crisis way before lots of us were. You started your company in 2009, so it's been a long time going. Can you talk about how Ecosia has entered the common knowledge, or how people have started joining Ecosia? Because I guess we're given Google. We know Google exists. And how, you know, you've told me that more and more people are switching to Ecosia.
Yes, so I think it's various factors that are coming together. Last year alone, we grew by more than 100%, and I think that is because people are much more aware of the climate change topic now, and we offer a very good solution to that. So it's basically one of the easiest things that you can do, but it still has a very high impact. So by making Ecosia your default search engine, you can absorb up to a few tons of CO2 every year, and that's quite a lot. But the big growth basically only started when we turned from a small hobby project, I would say, where I was asking all my friends if they could help here and there, into a real company. So at some point, we were big enough, we had enough income to actually pay salaries, and we also, so I took on some advisors, Tim, who's basically a business angel for Ecosia, and he brought in some knowledge, and we really turned from a chaotic startup bunch of people who just wanted to save the world into a company that really, really operated like a normal for-profit startup, but with a good purpose. So I think that was the point where we started investing more into the technology, more into marketing, and at some point it just started working out. Then the numbers got higher and higher, and now let's see where we can go, because if we want to solve climate change, then we need to plant hundreds of billions of trees. And we could do that if we were as big as Google. So if you all use Ecosia as your search engine now, then yeah, who knows where we can land.
Can you explain what happened during the Amazon burning crisis? You said it's a tragedy, but incredibly, some people actually found out about Ecosia through this tragedy.
Yes. So last year, when the Amazon was burning, people were super frustrated but didn't really know what to do. And then basically all of the users of Ecosia recommended, hey, you can use this search engine and you can help reforest the planet. It's of course not the ultimate solution to the problem, but it's at least something that you can do. And suddenly we ended up in the #1 in more than a dozen countries in the app stores. So we had more downloads than Instagram, WhatsApp, Facebook, and so on. And yeah, we basically increased our usership by 30% in just 1 week. So that was great, but of course we were also very, very sad about what's happening in Brazil, but it allowed us to further increase our tree planting activities in Brazil. And there are a lot of organizations in Brazil who are really struggling at the moment because the government is cutting down funding, and it's really great that we can now step in and actually help them survive and also expand their work.
I think, as we were saying earlier, as Alexandre was saying earlier, lots of people here are budding entrepreneurs or people who want to go into social enterprise. What would you share with them as your biggest learning experience while doing this Ecosia adventure?
So I meet a lot of entrepreneurs who basically just want to build a business and then make a lot of money. Sometimes that works, but I personally find that this is not very fulfilling. So you don't really have a good life then. I think you should really pick something that you deeply care about, because ultimately you will spend 10 years at least working on this. And I would also hope that a lot of people care about our planet and our climate, and that we need more entrepreneurs focused on the real problems. And the real problems is not how I can buy more shoes online, but it's how we solve climate change. That's the topic of our generation. And yeah, if you do that, then I would also suggest that you try to find a mentor, so somebody who has already done it and somebody who also cares about what you're doing. Because we have done so many stupid mistakes in the beginning, and you don't have to do all of them again.
Do you, as I think this is the whole topic of this conversation, do you think the world of startups is changing, that we're investing in actually something different? Do you think it's inevitable that this kind of social enterprises with purpose, come along?
I really hope so. I mean, I can't see into the future, but I'm a big fan of Star Trek. Who of you knows Star Trek? Yes, I think so, a few people at least. I never heard anybody on board of the enterprise to talk about salaries or stock markets. So I think there is a different world possible. And I think we can only solve climate change if we really also address some of the problems that we have in our current capitalistic systems, especially with big corporations. We have to address that as well. That's why I really like this model that we have with as a purpose company, which is kind of the opposite of our hyper capitalistic model. And I hope that more people really go into jobs that they really care for, that they really follow their purpose. I hope that more companies actually really find their purpose again and don't sacrifice human rights or ecological standards just for the sake of profit making. So this is what I really hope the world will look like once I'm gone.
And on the other side, what's the biggest mistake you've done while building Ecosia?
I think the biggest mistake for the first few years was not having a mentor. I think really finding somebody who can show you the way a little bit. This way also, I always compare Ecosia to a tree that now has very, very strong roots, and it was difficult to build those roots, but now the tree can basically grow very big thanks to these strong roots. And we could have maybe gone a bit faster, but maybe, who knows, it could have also harmed the company.
Can you discuss your process a little bit? As we talked about the chief tree planting officer, whose job I want, by the way. But just generally, how do you set about? I guess the idea of tree planting is something that everyone talks about, but it seems quite vague. And how do you decide where's good planting, why, etc.? How does your tree planting officer decide all of these things?
Yes, so we have a list of standards that have to be fulfilled. So it can't be monocultures, for example, no child labor, equal treatment of men and women, and so on. And so these are the minimum requirements that all organizations have to fulfill. And then we look basically into the design of the project to make sure that it is really beneficial for the people and also for the local ecosystem. Because what we're trying to do through tree planting is basically to repair the ecosystem and to allow the people to make a good income again in their area. And this is more difficult than just putting trees somewhere and then basically forgetting about it. And a lot of tree planting currently is not done in the right way. I think tree planting is really one of the most powerful things that we can do to solve climate change, but it has to be done in the right way. And yeah, I think a lot of our projects are really setting new standards there. And then we're also using technology to basically count our trees. So we're using the people who are planting trees, they then take pictures of them, they get uploaded to our servers, and we basically add them to our database. We use drone images, satellite images, and so on to really make sure that the trees survive. And we actually, when we say we planted 82 million trees, those are trees that survived. So we actually planted a few more. And also, if something should go wrong, which happens, then we take the trees out of the tree counter again. So I think we have a very, very high standard when it comes to the quality of the trees that we're planting.
To go back to the purpose of this talk, did you ever consider to make EcoZia a non-profit? Or I guess, you know, you're a for-profit company. Why did you not make it a non-profit?
Yeah, so in the sense of a non-profit, I never wanted to go and ask people for money. I think this is because you also make yourself very dependent from the people who have money. And I think what I wanted is this independence, because we can really, because we're generating, thanks to our users, we're generating income, and we can do with that income what we think is best for our planet. And this freedom for me is super, super important. If we had to ask big donors, then they basically would tell us what to do with that money, and it doesn't feel right for me. Also, I'm a business person. I want to win. I want that Ecosia at some point is bigger than Google. Again, not to become a billionaire, but because I think that's a great way of protecting our planet or repairing our planet. And this kind of instinct or this need for competition is very important for me.
So going forward, what are the biggest challenges you see ahead for your company and for you?
We need more people to use Ecosia. Still, I mean, we're Europe's biggest search engine, but still we're only 1%. We have less than 1% market share here in France. So Google still has 98, 97 or something like that. So please talk about it, install it on your phone. I stopped making advertisement now. But this is, of course, the biggest problem. Google has billions of dollars for marketing, for lobbying, and so on. And we somehow have to find our way to get attention. And then also, Google has built, so this business of search is protected, this fortress of search is protected by Android and Chrome, which they built just to protect their search business. And it's really difficult to get into these systems. So Google is very smart, but also not always fair when it comes to competition. And that's making it even harder for us to gain some market share.
So I'm going to give you one last moment to advertise your company as we're finishing this off. Can you please tell everyone here, maybe some of them don't have Ecosia, how to install it on their phones, how to install it on their laptops? It's a plugin.
Yes, so you basically, I mean, if you're on your phone, then into the App Store, you just type Ecosia and you download it. It's also good for your privacy. We haven't mentioned that. So we protect your data. We don't sell it to anyone. We don't use it to track you on the internet. And if you're on your computer, there you can also use it. You just download a little browser extension, and then you're ready to plant trees. And as I said, Google is making a lot of money, and if we made that same amount of money, we could reforest our planet.
And I think to finish, one of the last things that you said to me is actually your ad clicks are used to advertise to you and broadcast things to you, and that maybe in the future you might use that to actually tell us how to consume more wisely, better, etc.
Yes, so Ecosia is also here to make you a better person, basically, to exaggerate a little bit. So let's say you type in that you want to buy a flight from Paris to Toulouse into Ecosia, then in the future we would like to show you that you could maybe take the train instead and how many kilos of CO2 you could save because of that. So we will give that transparency how certain actions have certain consequences so that you can make better decisions with us. So we want to help you lead a more sustainable life as well.
Thank you very much, Christian.